It's News Review time. Stay tuned to Press TV. The British government has introduced a bill to Parliament designed to curb the impact of strikes over pay that continue to paralyze services across the nation.
So I'm introducing a bill that will give government the power to ensure that vital public services will have to maintain a basic function by delivering minimum safety levels, ensuring that lives and livelihoods are not lost. Mr. Speaker, we're looking at 6 key areas, each of them critical for keeping the British people safe and society functioning. These are health, education, fire, rescue, transport, border security and nuclear decommissioning. We do not want to use this legislation, but we must ensure the safety of the British public. During the passage of the bill, we intend to consult on what an adequate level of coverage looks like in fire, ambulance and in rail services. For the other sectors covered in the bill,
Unions have described the bill as undemocratic and unworkable, urging lawmakers to reject it. The bill will not be debated on Tuesday and could take months to become law. The opposition Labour Party says it will repeal the law if it comes to power in a national election expected next year. Britain's experiencing a wave of industrial actions, with workers demanding wages in tandem with rising inflation, which is now around 40-year highs. Nurses, ambulance staff, and rail workers are among those who have staged walkouts. And so far, talks between the government and trade unions have failed to produce a breakthrough. Okay, to explore the reasons for this and get some insight, I'm joined by Said Puraza, my colleague in London. Also with me is John Ross. He's a senior fellow with the Chang Yang Institute for Financial Studies in London as well. Good to see you, gentlemen. Now, Said, beginning with you, tell us on what ground the unions are rejecting this bill, that the government, seems like the government likes it.
Well, what the unions are saying that what the government is calling its minimum services bill or legislation is in fact an anti-strike piece of legislation aimed at weakening the union movement, preventing the unions from really having the impact that they want on the government to get the government to meet their demands, giving the employers the ability to sue unions, the ability to sack employees if they refuse to work during the time of industrial action, basically rendering strike action ineffectual, ineffective. And as we heard Grant Shapps say in that soundbite earlier, that is going to impact several key sectors such as the NHS, the railway, as well as education. This is the so-called watered-down version of the bill that was introduced during the short premiership of former Prime Minister Liz Truss under Jacob Rees-Mogg, the former business secretary, that had put down a stricter threshold for a strike to take place. The government has said that it will drop that because it feared it feared legal action by the unions against the government. The reaction again from the new unions has been furious, especially because this comes only a day after those failed crisis talks between the unions and government ministers just yesterday. And they're saying now, the unions are, that they are going to band together to continue with their strike action to defend their workers, despite the fact that the government might find many different ways to, quote unquote, attack them. The Labour opposition party has also come out saying that they will repeal this piece of legislation if elected into government in the next general election, having many people raising the question of what is really the point of this legislation if Labour is going to repeal it later on. And so that is really the state of play at the moment. There will be, of course, consequences as well. For instance, this could really backfire. According to the government's own admission, really, to the media, unions, for example, could strike more frequently to put pressure on the employers, or workers could take non-industrial action kind of measures, such as refusing to work overtime, that could prove crippling for several industries. So what the government is now doing is, in addition to introducing this new legislation, is asking the unions to call off their strikes and talk about pay rises for next year. But that's not what the unions are asking for. They want a pay rise now. Some are even wanting the pay rises to be backdated, because they're saying they haven't had a proper pay rise since the 2010 financial crisis, and that they have had enough of it. Enough is enough, and they want that to happen right now, which means we're going to see those strike actions go on in the coming weeks and beyond, Beverly.
Okay, John, the strike action has been going on. Different sectors have been walking out of their jobs. So what is it that the government trying to do? Does the government really want to solve the problem? Is it capable or incapable? I mean, is this foot dragging or what? And also the second question is the pay rise a solution, or maybe it requires maybe some larger scale action, maybe an overhaul or a reform of the economy?
Well, there's two different things there. One, would the government like to solve this? Yes. Is it capable of solving it? No. Because we've got to look at what is really happening. If you take at the situation of the British population, the British population has gone along with British foreign policy, I'm afraid, for a very long time. I mean, centuries. But it's become increasingly dissatisfied with what are the consequences of that. That is the immediate effects. I would like to report to you that the British population, the trade unions, have become thoroughly fed up with Britain's international role in cold wars, hot wars, sanctions, etc. But it wouldn't be true. What is the case, and this is new, is that it's become thoroughly fed up with what is the immediate consequences of this, which is the reductions in living standards and so on. It hasn't yet understood the connection between the two, that the fact that Britain is engaged in international sanctions, that it's giving billions of pounds to Ukraine when with the war that's going on, when it's not paying its own nurses, it's not paying its own doctors, etc. It's true, unfortunately, that the British population hasn't understood this. But what is true is that the British population is no longer going with what the government wants to do immediately. And this will have consequences, of course, because if the government is forced to pay more out in wages and welfare and health spend, it'll have less money to spend on military activities. And therefore, previously, the governments of Britain could go along with relatively democratic means, or formally democratic means. Now they can't even resort to formally democratic means because the population is increasingly not willing to go along with the immediate government aims. So this is a somewhat new situation in Britain, and that's why you're having the abandonment of policy which has existed for a long time. And if you take these people, I mean, the Royal College of Nursing, for example, has been existing for 100 years and has never staged a strike. It's quite unprecedented that it's going on strike. Or criminal barristers, for example, who are definitely not a hotbed of left-wing extremism, are going on strike. And this is a new and big problem for the government. It's resulting to it by authoritarian measures.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Said Puraza and John Ross in London. Thank you for watching this episode of the News Review.